Hello. All right, guys. It's podcast time. And we're back home today. I've been kind of doing a lot of them at the gym the last little while, but just the way the day worked out, got home for it today. And guys, today we're talking about quitting. And I know it seems like a little bit of a strange topic, but let me talk you through my thought process. So we're talking about quitting because I posted something this morning about my first job in strength and conditioning and how the hours were shit, the pay was shit, like kind of everything was shit, but it was like that first foot in the door. And then 8 years later, I'm literally doing everything that I've ever wanted. And I know that even that is just the beginning. Like I'm nowhere near as far as I know that I can be down the road, but it was just, I wanted to talk a little bit more about that journey. A couple of times that, I would never say close to quitting, but a couple of times where I was like legitimately not sure how I was going to make it through the month. And then just kind of what kept me going and why. So as you guys tune in, drop me a message, drop me a comment, let me know how training's going, let me know how life is going, let me know if you've got anything interesting coming up, and we are going to get right into it. We're going to do a little bit of Q&A on the Instagram account after the podcast is over, so make sure you're sticking around for that. But we're going to get going straight away. We're talking about quitting, and we're going to go in 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Elite Development Podcast, the #1 show for athletes looking to gain an edge on their opponents and build their dream careers in sport. I am your host, Dusseault, and today we're talking about quitting. So because we're talking about quitting, the first thing I want to come to is, I'm sure you guys have probably seen this meme. There's a guy digging for gold. I can't remember the exact context. I think he's digging for gold and he's like, deep, 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 deep. And it shows he's been digging for a really long time. And then he's like right about to strike gold. You see it from the outside. He's like this far away from actually striking gold, For those listening on the audio only, my fingers were about an inch apart. Like he was very, very close to striking gold. And then he decides, fuck this, it's too hard, I'm going home. And he turns around and he walks back out of the tunnel. And every single time I have moments where I'm like, man, this is so hard. I don't know what's next. I don't know how I'm going to make it, whatever else it might be. I always come back to that. I'm like, man, imagine if I quit today and it turns out that it was going to turn around tomorrow. Right? Like imagine if things are really tight right now. I'm not going well. I've lost some clients. Business is rough. And I'm like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm just going to go get a shitty job that I'm not going to like, but whatever, I gave it a try. And then imagine that it was literally one more day that I needed before everything turned around. And every single time over the years where I've had those days, and when I tell you I have had thousands of those days, I am not exaggerating. Like there have been a lot of days where I'm like, man, how the fuck am I going to do this? There have been a lot of days where the 29th of the month comes around and I'm like, I don't have fucking rent money. I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do for next month. And then like a new client would come out of the woodwork, or I would get a message being like, hey, you got, I remember one time getting a random check from the Ontario government that had been forgotten about, that I hadn't lived there in 3 years at the time. But the check came in and it was literally enough to cover rent. And I was like, holy fuck, I don't know why this came in, but I can make it another month now. And every single time that happened, that was all I would think. Is I'm like, man, this kind of sucks right now. Things are rough. It's like, but what if it all turned around tomorrow? I would not be able to live the next 60, 70 years of my life being like, dude, I just needed one more day. If I had done it for one more day, I could have lived the life I wanted instead of settling for whatever the fuck I'm doing now. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the story of that first job that I had in strength and conditioning. So I was working at this gym, the Ontario, I can't even remember the name of the gym anymore. It was, but it changed a couple times while I was there. And basically it was like a hockey training center. We worked mostly with little kids. There were some personal training clients. And I was the new guy at the gym. They had, I think, 3 coaches when I got hired. And so I was the new guy. I kind of got got the stuff that the other coaches didn't want, which, like, you know, in the beginning, that makes sense. Like, I had no problem kind of coming in and taking the hours that I knew nobody else was really loving. But as I took those hours, you know, like I said in that post this morning, my first hour of the day was always at 9 o'clock in the morning. And then my second hour of the day was usually at 5 o'clock in the 5 o'clock in the evening. And I would usually do like a 5, 6, and a 7, or a 5 and a 6, depending on the day. And then I would be taking clients for people when, like, somebody was out of town or sick or whatever. I was kind of always the guy that I was like, yes, please, anything to pay enough money that I can buy groceries next week. And so the bonus part of that as well, to make it extra fun, was I lived about 45 minutes from the gym. So I would drive in for 1 hour, and then I had the choice of either stay at the gym literally all day and then, you know, stick around for my 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock sessions, or drive 40 minutes home and then drive 40 minutes back in rush hour. So usually take like an hour and a half to get back for the evenings. So, like, I was in the car as much as I was actually at work. And when I look back, honestly, I was kind of spending enough in gas that I wasn't really making any money at all, but I was kind of just surviving. And I remember probably on a weekly basis coming home and being like, why the fuck am I still working here? Like, what am I doing? Why am I still here? Why am I doing this? And I remember every single time I had that thought coming back to, you have your foot in the door. You know, you have your foot in the door. This is a start. It's not going to stay like this forever. And, you know, then like the week would, then payday would come and my paycheck would bounce. You know, I'd get a message saying, like, you know, the money wasn't going through. And then I'd get a message from the owner of the gym saying, oh, you know, we'll get it to you in a few days, or like, we can pay you half now and half later. So, like, I was really scraping by. But every single one of those days that I would come home, you know, and I would have that, you know, I'd be home at like 7:30 p.m. from my 3-hour day that started at 9 a.m. I remember sitting down on the couch being like, watching, you know, my roommates that were making decent money, working reasonable hours, and thinking, man, like, that looks pretty good right about now. Like, you know, just home by 5, pulling in a nice salary. Like, oh, if I could find something like that, that sounds pretty damn good. But then even every time I would feel that, I'd wake up the next day and I'd go back to that fucking gym. And the thing that really kept me going through it, the thing that really made me decide, like, no, I'm going to keep going to this stupid gym, even though it's, like, honestly miserable a lot of the time, was coming back to having my foot in the door and coming back to understanding that it's like, this is paying the dues, you know, because for a long, long time, I don't think I wanted to admit it to myself, but for a long, long time, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to not, you know, go to my 9 to 5, be home, and kind of have that just like regular old life, which, like, anybody listening to that, there is nothing wrong with that. I'm not sitting here saying that you need to want something more than that. But for a long time, I wanted something different. I wanted something more than that. And so every single day that I would wake up and I'd be like, this sucks. Why do I do this? I'd keep going back to the gym because I realized, and a lot of the time it was subconscious, but I kept thinking, I was like, this is going to go somewhere. I'm going to keep doing this, but there's going to hit a point where I don't have to do this shit anymore. There's going to be a point where I'm through this. And I think that was honestly the biggest lesson from the whole time at that gym was, if you want to rise to something exceptional, if you want to, you know, do something more than average, you've got to be willing to deal with that kind of shit. And so first, you know, I understand now that where I'm at right now, compared to where I was 10 years ago, is unbelievably exceptional. However, I also understand that, for lack of a nicer way to say it, I ain't shit. Like, there are people doing way cooler things than me, doing way more than me, making way more money than me, working with, you know, more higher level, different people. Like, there's always new levels. But when I talk about, you know, doing something exceptional, I'm literally spending every single one of my days now doing exactly what I wanted to do when I was a kid. Like, and how many people get to say that? Not very many. But literally every day I wake up and I spend my days training high-level amateur and professional athletes, which is what I wanted to do when I was a kid. I made a bookmark in kindergarten when I was like 5 or 6 years old that had a weightlifter on it because I just like always loved, these like big, strong weightlifters and stuff like that. And then that just led to that passion that ended up bringing me down this road. And so when I was in that shitty position, all I could keep thinking was, this is going to lead somewhere better. Keep doing it and keep eating the shit because this is going to lead somewhere better. And what that also brings me to, and this is what I think can really help a lot of people from that story. So if you've stuck around for as long as you have, I appreciate you. What that really brought me to was, the lessons that I believe that people can take away from this. And that was why I felt like I wanted to quit. And when I really break it down, looking back on it, when I had those days and I was thinking of, it would be so nice to be doing something else or blah, blah, blah. All that really came down to was the people around me. And like, this is not any shot at any of the people around me. None of them like ever said anything like this, but I remember having one roommate that was, pulling in like a decent salary, like he was making good money. We were young. Money was not a concern. He wasn't, worrying about how he was going to pay rent that month. He was buying himself stuff that he liked and stuff that he wanted. And I remember just thinking, I was like, man, it would be so great to be able to live like that. Right. And it's like, I wasn't living like that. I was scraping together every penny so that I could pay my next month's rent, dealing with, whatever was kind of thrown my way and avoiding spending any dime that I could possibly spend. But it's like looking at people that were living that way, that were my age, was hard because I was like, man, like these guys are living such a better life than me on the surface. And again, I love all of those guys that I lived with all my heart. They were great people. They're still good friends. But I remember looking at that and being jealous of that and wanting to quit what I was doing so that I could have what they had. But years later, when I look back on it, I'm like, man, that would have been the worst decision I ever could have made. And like, don't get me wrong, this is not, any kind of shot at how any of these guys are living or what any of these guys are doing. They're all very happy and they're all living, good lives in their own respect. But I knew what I wanted deep down. I knew I wanted to work with athletes. I knew I wanted to be in gyms. I knew I wanted to do this. I wanted to go down this path. And so even though it was delayed, even though it was, it took a long time to get it, seeing these people around me and the things that they had was a blessing because it made me realize that I wanted my path more than I wanted that, more than I wanted comfort at the time. Because guys, it's fucking uncomfortable. Like when you're trying to build something for yourself, whether that's, a business in my case or an athletic career in a lot of the cases of the people watching, when you're trying to build something for yourself, it's fucking uncomfortable. It's hard. You're going to go through a lot of shit. And if you're willing to go through the shit and you're willing to continue to put one foot in front of the other, you're willing to continue to chip away at the dirt to break through the gold, eventually you will. But then if you coming at it the other way, if you're one of the people that sees the comfort and sees the people around you and sees, oh, he doesn't have to worry about money, or she's thinking this way, or she gets to go do that while I can't afford it. Those are the people that end up settling for the comfort and then regretting it later in life. So the reason that I didn't ever quit, and the reason that no matter how tempting it was, I didn't stop and try to find a different job and try to kind of gain that comfort earlier, was plain and simple. Every time I had that thought in my mind, I realized I was like, man, I'm going to look back at my life at 80 and I'm going to hate myself for not continuing to pursue what I actually wanted. Maybe this didn't work. Maybe I, kept pursuing coaching and eventually it beat me down enough that I was like, okay, this just wasn't meant for me. But I knew that I was like, I could give more. I could go back tomorrow. I could do another day of this. I could keep pushing forward. And as long as I felt like, okay, I could continue to try this one more day, I knew if I was 80 years old and I was looking back at life and I had quit doing this, I would regret it. So no matter how shitty it got, I kept doing it. And eventually it fucking broke through. So for people listening to this, for athletes listening to this, because I know a lot of you guys that listen to me are athletes, if you are in that kind of position, like if you're looking at your career right now, maybe you're coming off a couple of losses, maybe, finances are tight and you're kind of hitting that point where you're like, dude, like, this going to be worth it? Am I going to be able to really do this? Come back to that thought. Ask yourself, when you're looking back at life at 80 or 90 years old, are you going to regret stopping? Are you going to regret making the decision that, this career wasn't worth it anymore and going off and doing something else? Because on the flip side as well, if you think about it that way and you say, no, I'm going to be very happy and confident in that decision moving forward in my life, great. Like, make that decision, stop, go do something else. But a lot of people, I think, get confused as well, because they're like, well, I'm pursuing this dream, but it's so selfish that, like, I can't do that to my family, or I can't do that to my people, or I can't do that because of whatever reason. But then you've got to ask yourself after that, you're like, man, if you give up the thing that you like, let's say you're giving it up because you have a kid. And I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not a parent, so I'm not going to pretend that, you need to take my view on things and take it 100% seriously, because everybody's going to view this kind of thing differently. But let's say you have a dream of being an athlete, you have a kid, and then you give up on that dream of being an athlete because of your kid. 10, 15 years down the road, if you look back and you're like, man, I could have been a professional athlete, I could have done this, I could have done that, but I gave it up for you. First of all, how good are you going to feel about that kid? And second of all, how do you think that's going to make them feel looking at you? You know what I mean? So again, I'm not saying that it's going to be easy. I'm not saying that, you're going to pursue this dream and it's all going to be sunshine and rainbows. But that's the other angle to think about that, right? Because I understand the impulse of saying, well, I have a family now, so I need to think about it this way now instead. But just think about that side of it as well. Or, maybe it's not a kid, maybe it's another reason. But if you can confidently say, I'm making a decision that I'm going to be happy with for the rest of my life, power to you. But if you're looking at it and you're going, man, I really want to pursue this, I really like, this is my dream, this is what I want, but I'm going to give it up because of X, Y, Z reason, how are you going to feel 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? And if you can look at it that way, I'm confident you're going to make a better decision for yourself. But again, every situation is different. I'm not here to try to say that, I know best about everything. You need to make the decision that's best for you, depending on your situation. But guys, that's it. That's all. I hope you got some value from it. If you did, I'd love to know what it is. Drop me a message in the comments. And as always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will catch you on the next episode. And we are going to do some Q&A on the Instagram account. And guys, I appreciate you all tuning in on here, and I will talk to you all.